All right, Krishna, everyone. This is Achyuta Bhava, and today I'm answering another great bhakti question. This is part two of a two-part question that came in. The first question was about spiritual desire. What is spiritual desire? So this is part two. Same person said, in kind of a part two, can that form of spiritual desire become corrupt? Like with the pool that turns everything to gold you mentioned in a recent video, can our desire to be with God become too possessive, obsessive a behavior which isn't much better than material or earthly desire? Nice. Really good question. And then she followed up saying, I think about this a lot with ritual and prayer, obsessions with going through the motions and getting it right, but forgetting why we're doing it. Yes. So, a couple of things to say about this is, of course, intention in the heart is what matters. It doesn't matter that we be perfect in our practice. It matters that we have a desire to connect with God and that we practice that regularly with humility. That's what my teachers have taught me at any rate. And at the same time, there is a way in which we can become more obsessed with the form of something or the power derived from the form of something than the actual substance. So, for example, in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna calls out people who are obsessed with or enamored by the flowery words of the Vedas, which are these ancient spiritual texts that are Krishna does not denounce or renounce or anything like that. But Krishna is saying sometimes people look at those Vedic texts, which have a lot of ritualistic language and language and sort of spiritual technology meant for the Brahmins, and they're looking at them and getting obsessed with them, and he's essentially just says, that's not it. The being impressed with orthodoxy and the power that comes from a pulpit or the power that comes from a spiritual like a spiritual robe or mantle of some kind is not where it's at. Becoming impressed with the form of spirituality and the worldly power that might come with it is not where it's at. And that exists in every world religion ever, because anything can become perverted by our instinct to gain power or to lord it over other people. Essentially, what bhakti tells us and Krishna tells us over and over again is that everyone wants to be God. And the thing is that your real essence in bhakti is you're a servant of God, you're a friend of God, you're a mother, a brother, a lover. You have a personal relationship with God, and you're not God. You can't have that relationship, which is the tastiest fruit in all creation, if you're constantly running off to try and act like you're God and you're in control of everything, or you're the ultimate creator, controller, maintainer, etc. So we don't want to try to be God, and anything in this material world can become degraded into that kind of selfishness. Let me take power. Let me ascend to the top of some hierarchy. Let me be dominant, whatever. So we're going to have to live in the world because we're here. Krishna also says nobody can help but acting in this world, but being a part of it, because this world is being run by the modes of nature. And even when you can't even breathe without being a part of it. So we have to act. We're actors on the stage, and we have to learn how to develop spiritual desire. That is the desire to love, serve, and be connected with God, and to see God and serve God in all creation. And to do that, we have practices that we take up to help us get there and to help us learn how to curb the selfish motivations that lead to suffering and pain. So we are learning to do that, but there's nowhere that grace is implied everywhere. So it's not a merit-based system. And if you have a mixture of sometimes orthodox, power hungry, kind of you have some issues, in other words, with maybe going through the motions or getting obsessed with going through the motions, getting it right, but forgetting why we're doing it. If your spiritual desire becomes a little corrupt, the thing is that Krishna, in many different places in the Bhagavatam and in the Gita, makes sure that we know that even the smallest morsel of sincerity is what Krishna takes, and Krishna leaves the rest behind. So we have to be very careful, because one of the easiest ways to sit on the sideline in life spiritually is to use our frustration with the perversions of religion as a way of excusing ourselves from the the work, the commitment, the adventure, the uncertainties of spiritual life. It's very easy to get puritanical on the other side and say, well, if there are spiritual or religious people whose desires become, their spiritual desire becomes corrupted and it becomes just like a material desire, they just want name, fame, gain, they want to be God through religion or through spirituality, then we can agree that that's not cool and that we shouldn't do that. At the same time, what we're called to do is be merciful, to forgive, and to realize that God takes even the smallest morsel of that sincerity and brings that forward and leaves the rest behind. So we may have karma to play out with some of the things that we do, that especially, you know, when we fall down in spiritual life or pervert what we're doing somehow. But also it's inevitable that we're all going to do that, because none of us are pure. And so we should always look first to our own inadequacies before quitting spiritual life on the grounds that some people corrupt it. Right. That's very important, because there's a lot of people, again, that sit on the sidelines because they were disenchanted on some level by some spiritual leader's humanness or the failings or failings of a church or a religious organization or something like that. We can't sit on the sidelines just because sometimes spiritual life can be degraded. Because if that was, you know, that was the case, no one would ever get there. You know, no one would ever be able to open their hearts and connect with something more. So grace has to be a part of it. But yes, spiritual desires can become corrupt. Here's something to think about too. This is just a little esoteric, but I think you'll like it. So there is a prayer, and it is, if I can find it. This is a prayer called the Sri Shikshastakam. And I won't read it in Sanskrit because it's long, and I'll save you my poor Sanskrit. But this is the prayer that came from Lord Chaitanya, who is the combined incarnation of Radha and Krishna in an avatar of the Kali Yuga. This is a sort of like a prophet of the Bhakti movement that came 500 years ago. Let there be all victory for the chanting of the holy name of Lord Krishna, which can cleanse the mirror of the heart and stop the miseries of the blazing fire of material existence. That chanting is the waxing moon that spreads the white lotus of good fortune for all living entities. It is the life and soul of all education. The chanting of the holy name of Krishna expands the blissful ocean of transcendental life. It gives a cooling effect to everyone and enables one to taste full nectar at every step. My Lord, O Supreme Personality of Godhead, in your holy name there is all good fortune for the living entity, and therefore you have many names, such as Krishna and Govinda, by which you expand yourself. You have invested all your potencies in those names, and there are no hard and fast rules for remembering them. My dear Lord, although you bestow such mercy upon the fallen conditioned souls by liberally teaching your holy names, I am so unfortunate that I commit offenses while chanting the holy name, and therefore I do not achieve achieve attachment for chanting. One who thinks himself lower than the grass, who's more tolerant than a tree, and who does not expect personal honor, but is always prepared to give all respect to others, can very easily always chant the holy name of the Lord. O Lord of the universe, I do not desire material wealth, materialistic followers, a beautiful wife, or fruitive activities described in flowery language. All I want life after life is unmotivated devotional service to you. O my Lord, O Krishna, son of Maharaj Nanda, I am your eternal servant, but because of my own fruitive acts, I have fallen into this horrible ocean of nescience. Now please be causelessly merciful to me. Consider me a particle of dust at your lotus feet. My dear Lord, when will my eyes be beautified by filling with tears that constantly glide down as I chant your holy name? When will my voice falter and all the hairs on my body stand erect in transcendental happiness as I chant your holy name? My Lord Govinda, because of separation from you, I consider even a moment a great millennium. Tears flow from my eyes like torrents of rain, and I can see the entire world as void. Let Krishna tightly embrace this maidservant who has fallen at his lotus feet, or let him trample me or break my heart by never being visible to me. He is a debauchee after all and can do whatever he likes, but he is still no other than the worshipable Lord of my heart. It's a beautiful prayer. Again, it's called the Shikshastakam, and it's the only prayer that was said to be written down from Lord Chaitanya, who's this Kali Yuga golden avatar of Krishna. Now, what I wanted to point out, the reason that I read this is because here you have an incarnation of the Lord, an avatar praying this prayer. That's really, really important because it's sort of like saying, look, even God likes to pray. And even God likes to pray from a humble position. So, I mean, read this verse, right? This is God praying. One who thinks himself lower than the grass, who is more tolerant than a tree, and who does not expect personal honor, but is always prepared to give all respect to others, can very easily always chant the holy name of the Lord. O Lord of the universe, I do not desire wealth, followers, a beautiful spouse, or fruitive activities, meaning things that I go and do and want, described in flowery language. All I want, life after life, is unmotivated devotional service to you. That's God praying for that. So when God teaches us how to pray, God is teaching us something not only about what to say or what to want on some philosophical level that has to be applied. God is teaching us like a state of consciousness in this verse. What is the state of consciousness? The state of consciousness is that God reaching out in desire and love for connection, right? And that's what's so beautiful about bhakti. That's all we want. And so, when we get lost in anything other than that sincere emotion or desire, which we do all the time, then that's when things can become perverted or corrupt. It's not that God is way up here, some high king in the sky, and I'm way down here, and I have to put away the dirty world and only want that big king in the sky. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about not desiring any honor or credit or anything for myself. Just let me love, right? And you know how good it feels to love? Think if you have children, I can say this firsthand. There's nothing I can think of in my human experience that feels better than loving my little girls, right? Not what I get from them, but loving them, the way that it feels in my heart to be in love with them, to feel my appreciation and like tenderness, and to feel those things moving out of my heart toward them. That's what actually feels good. And what does God come down and do? It takes a form in the human world and prays that same prayer. Let me feel love and connection moving outside of myself. So what do we say, that the only thing that can control God is the love of his devotees, the love of God's, in other words, that God is seeking reciprocal exchange with human beings. That's the essence of it. If we don't want that, if we think we're doing something else, we're trying to get merit, we're trying to earn our way up to some king in the sky. So we think that God is looking down on us for our sins and we messed up, or no, the door is always wide open. The center is always open for everyone. The prerequisite is only that you want to shift and remember that loving and feeling love flowing from you toward others and toward the source of our being, nothing beats that. So anything other than that is an example of being corrupt. Anything other than that. And that's why there needs to be so much grace and mercy. That's why God is always reaching out to us 10 times more than we ever could to God, always in every circumstance saying, come home, come back to love, come back to feeling love for me, for others, for the world. Let love flow out of your heart. Come back to that. Where are you? And we're like, oh, okay. And then when God comes down and says, no, I'm one of you too. That's what I need. And that's what I want too. That's then we're understanding. So of course, if that's how God is going to say, look, don't go get lost in the orthodoxy about religion. But there's also a word in bhakti called laulyam, which means greed. And there's such a thing as spiritual greed. And that's encouraged in bhakti at very high esoteric levels. It's sort of like saying at a point we want, maybe not in the beginning when we have lots of worldly responsibilities and we have to make sure that we are not faking like we are somewhere that we're not, that we eventually we have to cultivate the sense of wanting to be with God more than anything else, that we do Jones for it. Because if you read what the ecstatic, almost like high level symptoms of bhakti are in these highly realized bhaktas, um, they're often pretty bonkers. They're people who are intensely absorbed into love, and it gets pretty ecstatic, and it can look to other people in the world problematic. But this is not for us. Like I would say, I mean, maybe there's someone out there, but definitely not where I'm at. And probably more often than not, the worldly kind of, if people see people getting greedy, our desire to be with God becomes greedy. It's in everyday sense, it's probably turning into, I want power or appreciation from others for how like holy I am or something like that. So that's what I've got. I hope that this was helpful. Thank you for a great two-part question that could make two videos. It's nice to be able to do that. And feel free to send any more questions you have, info@nightlightastrology.com, and put Bhakti question in Bhakti Q&A or Bhakti question into the subject line. All right, that's what I've got. Take it easy, everyone. Hare Krishna.